While the wasteland is home to many hazards, mutants, death traps, raiders, one of the most ever-present environmental hazards is radiation. But what exactly is radiation? How does it work in Fallout versus real life? And where exactly are the most irradiated places in the game? Let's talk about it. Radiation is one of the deadliest forces in the Fallout universe. It's an invisible killer, warping the land, turning people and creatures into monsters and mutants, and creating some of the most dangerous locations in the wasteland. But while Fallout leans heavily on this idea of radiation as an immediate, ever-present threat, it doesn't quite match up with how radiation works in real life. In fact, the way Fallout handles radiation is more of a science fiction mechanic than a reflection of actual nuclear science. In the most basic terms, radiation is just energy. Energy that moves through space in the form of waves or particles. Some types of radiation, like the light from the sun, are seen as completely harmless. But ionizing radiation, the kind released by nuclear bombs and radioactive materials, is an entirely different story. This kind of radiation is strong enough to strip electrons from atoms, which damages DNA and cells in living organisms. Radiation exposure is most often measured in sieverts or rads. Yes, rads is an actual unit of measurement that the Fallout games use. It's not just a fun short form. You know, the more you know. Now, the effects of radiation on the human body depend on the dose of radiation that you receive. Note, the following is from radiationanswers.org. Low doses would be considered under 100 millisieverts, or about 10 rads. At this dose, you might not feel anything at all. Long-term exposure to even low levels of radiation increases the risk of cancer, but it won't make you immediately sick. A moderate dose would be 500 to 1000 millisieverts, or 50 to 100 rads. It's around here that you could start experiencing mild radiation sickness. Above 500 millisieverts could cause some changes to blood cells, but the blood system can quickly recover. High doses are over 1 sievert, or about 100 rads. This is where things start to get serious. Symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and skin burns can be observable. And lethal doses are over 4 to 5 sieverts, or 400 to 500 rads. Without medical treatment, exposure at this level is usually fatal, and a dose of 10 sieverts, 1000 rads, will usually lead to death within hours. But many times in real life, radiation sickness isn't some instantaneous event. Even at high doses, it can take hours or even days for the body to react. Cells don't just shut down immediately, like they're checking out for the day. Rather, this damage occurs steadily over time. But when we compare this to Fallout, notably Fallout 4 and 76, stepping into a highly irradiated area starts draining your health and raising your rads immediately. It almost acts as a slow-acting poison. The more radiation you're exposed to, the weaker you get. Your maximum hit points gradually decrease, being replaced with a red rad bar. Alternatively, in Fallouts 1 through New Vegas, radiation poisoning has various set stages. These either temporarily decrease your special stats, current hit points, and/or healing rate. Unlike 4 or 76, merely being irradiated doesn't result in any negative effect. Rather, you have to reach some radiation milestone. But both of these radiation tracking methods have been gamified. They don't accurately represent how radiation poisoning and exposure works in real life. It simplifies what are complex biological and physical processes into something that the player can understand, monitor, and address using things like RadAway, RadX, and the various radiation resistance perks. This can be further demonstrated with an example. There are very few sources of radiation in the games that are not applied as an overtime effect. Outside of things like getting hit with a direct blast from a gamma gun, you'll always just gradually have your rads increase. But one of the largest documented instantaneous doses of rads a human has received came during an accident at a nuclear facility in Wood River Junction, Rhode Island in 1964. A technician working at the facility, Robert Peabody, mistakenly caused a criticality accident where he instantaneously received a total dose of 8,200 rads. In the Fallout games, receiving this dose would instantaneously kill you 8 times over. But in real life, Peabody was able to run to another building for help, maintained consciousness for 16 hours after the incident, and lived for another 33 hours before succumbing to his radiation poisoning. Radiation in Fallout isn't the same as radiation in real life. You can receive a lethal dose just as fast, but you won't die as fast as you would in the Fallout games. And this doesn't even cover all the minor radiation exposures that can eventually lead to cancer or other radiation-related illnesses that lead to death years or decades later. For example, the Windscale nuclear accident in 1957 didn't result in any immediate deaths, but there are estimates that anywhere from 100 to 240 people died of cancer in the long term as a result of the accident. So if radiation in Fallout worked similarly as it does in real life, the Fallout lore would have tons and tons of cancer-related deaths occurring, but we don't see those. Instead, we have people and cults who willingly soak up as much radiation as possible, as though they are some kind of rad-addicted sponge. And so, if you wanted to be a radiation sponge, where should you go? What are the most irradiated places in Fallout? Well, in the first Fallout, the Glow is the game's most lethal area, at least in terms of radiation. Going there without at least 2 doses of RadX, giving 100% rad resistance, will result in an instantaneous death. In Fallout 3, there are a few notable irradiated places. At the entrance of Vault 87, rads can get up to nearly 4,000 rads per second. It's nearly impossible to get to the entrance without immediately perishing. In the Pit DLC, rads in the Monongahela River can range anywhere from 200 to around 2,500 rads per second. And the Delta 9 rocket near the Statesman Hotel gives a surprising amount of rads. It's unexpected. New Vegas has a bunch of irradiated spots, but few give an absurd amount of rads. Camp Searchlight has a constant radiation of up to 28 rads per second. The Devil's Throat, where you find the game's unique minigun, gives plus 6 rads per second. The old nuclear test site is expectedly relatively high, at 20 rads per second. But the most irradiated places, unsurprisingly, comes from the Lonesome Road DLC. Yeah, the one where you quote-unquote mistakenly detonated a nuclear bomb. The edge of the crater at the Long 15 gives 20 rads per second. Ground Zero at Drywells can get into the triple digits, and at the center of the Courier's Mile, you can receive 25-ish rads per second, but overall New Vegas keeps their rads relatively low. As expected, the game with the glowing sea, Fallout 4, has a bunch of highly irradiated areas. For starters, the glowing sea can get into the low hundreds. A pair of nuclear reactors emit like 60-ish rads per second. The same is true for the radioactive barrels in the gazebo at Swan's Pond, and the barrels at Hugo's Hole near the Dunwich Borers. And the reactor room of the mass fusion building gives an absurd amount of rads. Drinking the water at the bottom of the reactor gives the highest amount of rads possible. It's an instant kill if you're not wearing the unique robes of atoms devoted, which prevent death from radiation poisoning. If you are wearing the robes, you'll see plus 9,999 rads after drinking. You can't top that. Then it's in Fallout 76 that there are a ton of high rad locations. Some will just instantly kill you, like the Fisher sites, and others just have an absurd amount of rads. But because of the online nature of the game, and the rad resistance baked into perks and armors, it's hard to get exact numbers. But some of the highest rad spots are nuclear blast zones created by players launching nukes, the tunnels at the Emmett Mountain disposal site, the HZ-21 disposal field, and the crater at the Foundation outpost, but only if the rad scrubber's been destroyed during the eviction notice event. I should also note that Fallout 76's most recent update, Ghoul Within, added the Ghoul settlement of Radiant Hills, which naturally gives off a bunch of radiation. So, while these are some of the most irradiated places in the Fallout games, places that usually require some RADX or RADaway after visiting, the reality is that Fallout's version of radiation is its own thing. It's designed to be a game mechanic, to be interactive, dramatic, and visual. It gives players an environmental hazard to manage and be mindful of. But in reality, as mentioned before, radiation doesn't work like that. There's no red bar slowly creeping up on your screen. The symptoms of radiation sickness don't really adhere to a milestone system, letting you eat as much radiation as you want up until a certain score is reached. Real radiation is silent, slow, unseen, and its dangerous and lethal effects sometimes aren't even seen for years. It's just a tad ironic that the series named after radiation doesn't actually use lifelike or realistic radiation. Though I do suppose that having the Vault Dweller die of cancer instead of discovering the Arroyo village would make for a pretty sobering ending to a pretty iconic character. That's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Join the Discord. What other aspects of Fallout don't match real life? Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Hey, kiddies, this is Three Dog. Bow wow, your voice in the darkness. Or at least the radiation.